Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm glad you're here once again. Today, we're talking about one of the most harmful, invisible expectations placed on helpers by society, by systems, by clients, and yes, oftentimes by ourselves. And this is the myth of the strong helper. The idea that you have to be steady, calm, regulated, wise, grounded, and emotionally unshakable at all times. This myth tells you you shouldn't struggle, as if struggling means incompetence rather than humanity. It says that you shouldn't need support, as if needing support and help means you're not capable. That you shouldn't show emotion, as if emotional expression threatens your professionalism. You shouldn't have limits, as if boundaries are flaws instead of essential structures. That you shouldn't break down, as if breaking down is a sign of failure instead of a sign of being alive. And lastly, that you shouldn't be human, as if we as helpers are meant to be machines, endlessly available and endlessly regulated. And when you're inevitably human, the myth whispers you're failing. This episode is about dismantling that myth and reclaiming your right to be a full, complex, feeling human being. The myth of the strong helper didn't come from nowhere. It was built through layers of conditioning, culture, and even survival. For most people, this myth really truly starts with that conditioning, that professional conditioning. Training programs often reward composure when you have the ability to stay calm even when your body is activated. Neutrality, suppressing your own emotional truth. Emotional containment, holding everything in even when it hurts. Intellectualization, prioritizing cognition over humanity. And self-sacrifice, giving more than you have to give. These expectations create a blueprint. If I'm emotional, I'm unprofessional. And it's not just within the training programs. Oftentimes, as we move into our careers, this is reinforced by the agencies that we work with and reinforced by our supervisors. And before we move into looking a little bit more at that systemic pressure that happens within our agencies and under the systems that we work with, I'd like to tell a little bit of a story about this professional conditioning that I experienced kind of midway through my career. At this time, I'd already been in the field probably maybe about 11, 12 years. I had spent a number of years as a school counselor and then came back into mental health after school counseling positions were cut. And I had spent most of my career obviously working with children. And sometimes you work very differently with children than you do with adults, right? Children are much more playful and you get down on the floor and you have a good time with them and you play with them. And, you can't help but be really engaged and you're having fun right along with the kids. As you're doing certain things, especially working as a school counselor. I really enjoy that position, but even though I love working within mental health too. But at this particular time, I was being observed by my supervisor, who was a great supervisor. I want to preface that. He really was a great supervisor. But he had these very kind of concrete notions about what I already talked about training programs, about composure and neutrality and emotional containment. And he did not believe in sharing anything with your members. He had already observed me a couple other times, and I did have one member ask him one day, just naturally, where are you from? Do you have kids? Are you married? And he's like, no. And I'm looking at him what's wrong with saying that you're married? She's not she just wants to get to know you. But I didn't really say anything outwardly. I was like, okay, that's his style. But the session that he was observing in that really impacted me was with a client who was dying. She had a pretty severe medical condition that eventually was, going to kill her. And I may get emotional as I talk about this because she did end up dying about a year or so after I started working with her. And this woman really taught me a lot about myself as a professional too. I think I gained just as much from her as she did for me in the time that we were working together. But during this session that my supervisor was observing me in, she and I had already made a lot of progress together. She was doing amazing. And her whole point of coming back into therapy after years of being like, I don't want to do therapy, I don't want to do it, just taking her meds and working through that, is that she realized she didn't have much time left. Her condition was getting much worse, and she wanted to work through her trauma before she passed, and wanted to live a better emotional life in whatever time she had left. And like I said, she had made a lot of growth, and she was a very different person from where we started to where we were when my supervisor was observing me that day. And she broke down in session and crying, not sad crying, but thankful crying, and crying over just how happy she was because she had grown so much. This was someone who took every tool that I taught her and just bloomed with it. She was doing amazing. And with that better attitude, she actually felt a little bit better too. Now, don't get me wrong, it didn't heal her physically, but it made her life brighter. And that's what she was kind of talking about during that session, about how much better she was doing. And she was just so emotional talking about it as we were processing it together that I actually started to tear up. And this woman was older, she had children my age, and she reached across and she kind of took my hand, and then she looked at my supervisor and she said, I can't tell you how amazing this young lady is and how much she has given me and taught me. And I reframed it. I did thank her for it, but I told her, I was like, you know what, you're the one who's done all the work. I just was here to guide you and to provide you with the tools, but you took them and you ran with them. And I did tell her, I was like, I am so happy to see you where you are now. And, we talked about what the plan was moving forward and what we wanted to continue to work on as we were kind of revising her treatment goals in that session too. And when we left, and we're driving back to the office because we did meet in her home due to her medical condition, my supervisor made a comment to me about my getting emotional in that session. And again, I wasn't crying or anything else like that, not as choked up as I am talking about it or anything else like that. But like I said, I did tear up. And, he was like, that's a little concerning. Are you getting too attached to this member? Do we need to look at if she should be reassigned to someone else? And like, I just swear, I think my mouth dropped open and I just kind of stared at him and I'm like, no, we have really good professional boundaries. She just is a powerful person to work with. And yes, I got a little teared up in the session because she was so emotional. Like, I couldn't help but feel it. And, he just kind of talked to me a little bit about having that composure and neutrality and blah, 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 blah. And he really made me question, like, is there something wrong with what I'm doing? But then I sat there and I thought about it afterwards and I just listened to what he had to say, and I didn't contradict him, and I just like, yeah, I understand about composure and I understand about professional boundaries. And I felt like after he and I were done talking that we were in an okay place, but I was still questioning myself. And really, truly, all I was being genuine. And I was attuned with this member, with all my members. And I didn't think that there was anything that I was doing that was wrong, but yeah, he made me question who I was as a therapist. Ultimately, though, it did not change my style. Because I came to realize, especially with the population that I was working with at that time, I was working with a lot of kids in foster care with extreme trauma. I was working with a lot of other adults, very much like this client that I mentioned, who were dealing with chronic illnesses, who were in a lot of pain and had suffered quite a bit through their life, not only because of their medical conditions, but also their trauma. And I recognized that, these people were doing better with me, not because I was necessarily this amazing therapist, but because I was genuine with them, because I didn't hold that part of me back. I wasn't sitting there crying with them and sharing all aspects of myself with them like I think my supervisor kind of thought I was. I was just being attuned and I was being real. I was showing unconditional positive regard, right? The cornerstone of person-centered treatment. And they connected with that. We connected together between client and therapist. And I think they actually did do better because I wasn't just spouting at them. I wasn't intellectualizing anything. I was meeting them where they were as a human, and I was being human with them while still maintaining my professional stance. And I think now, all these many years later, those of us that have been in the field, and if you follow any other therapists online, you may see this popping up a lot, that we're talking about this conditioning of being composed. Yes, it is important that we are composed. Very important that we are composed. We should not be sitting in sessions with our members going and crying with them and be like, oh my God, I know exactly what you mean because I deal with that too. We shouldn't be oversharing. We should be able to maintain our neutrality in the session, but not suppress ourselves. Neutrality in that we're not holding on to, we're not absorbing their own emotional state like I've talked about in other sessions. But we're allowed to be genuine and we're allowed to be human in the sessions. And clients learn more with that. They feel connected with that. They recognize that they truly are being heard and being seen when we are being true to ourselves as professionals. And I hope that as a supervisor that I'm not conditioning other people the same way, because many programs still really truly emphasize these pieces. Don't get emotional, don't overshare, be that consummate professional and intellectual and and not be human. But I think we're doing a disservice to our clients if we maintain that. So long story, very emotional story. Sorry if I got choked up a few times in there. Because that, like I said, that client still sticks with me today, even though she has since passed. I still think about what I learned with her and what I learned from that particular moment. And I hope that those of you that are listening maybe gain a little something from that too. That you can be a professional while still being human. So let's move on now to talk about some of the other ways that the myth of the strong helper has been cultivated. Systemic pressure is also one of the biggest ones of this. And I've already kind of touched on this when I talked about how, my supervisor reinforced this as well. But systemic pressure isn't just about the agencies that we work with. It's the total systems. It's about the insurance companies and everything else that exists within the helping field. Many of us work in systems that are underfunded, whether it's our agencies, ourselves, or directly dealing with our payers. It's a chronic complaint in this field that we are not getting paid to do the job that we do. But underfunded systems really truly rely on helpers who overfunction, that helpers are doing the work of 3 or more people. Helpers who absorb the overflow by taking on what the system cannot hold itself. That they fill in the gaps, becoming the safety net of the system and our members, and carrying the emotional labor, holding that weight of everyone else's distress. Systems that exist today survive because we as helpers overextend ourselves. And part of this comes from the additional ones that we'll talk about here, cultural narratives and internalized identity. We want to do the best that we can for the members that we serve. So we overextend to pick up the pieces that the system does not carry. Systems are constantly asking us to do more and more while paying us and giving us less and less. Cultural narratives is the next piece in this. Helpers are framed culturally as saints. We're endlessly patient. We're saviors. We're endlessly capable. We're fixers, endlessly resourceful. And we are emotional anchors. We're endlessly stable. But these narratives erase your humanity and replace it with archetypes. And I already mentioned internalized identity. And I think a lot of you are probably going to resonate with this. Many of us as helpers grew up being that responsible one. We were the caretakers within our circles, our families, or our circles of friends. We were the emotional buffer and the peacekeeper. So this myth of the strong helper feels familiar, even comforting, until it finally becomes suffocating. The myth of the strong helper really truly does have a high emotional price. It leads to chronic overfunctioning, where you do more than your share because you believe that you must. It leads to emotional suppression, where you hide your feelings to maintain that illusion of strength. There's also shame when you struggle, where you interpret normal human reactions as personal failures. And I hear this with a lot of helpers, and I've even heard it in myself many times. And sometimes I still catch myself doing this, where it's like, I'm a therapist, I should know better, right? Again, we're human. We're allowed to have normal human reactions. The myth of the helper can also lead to isolation, where you stop reaching out because you think you shouldn't need support, especially for those of us that are in these higher levels within the agencies and the systems that we work in, where we are independently licensed and don't maintain our own supervision. So it is important for us as independently licensed people or people who are working in private practice to continue to reach out to our support systems, because we do actually continue to need that support. The myth can also lead to resentment, where we give too much and receive too little. Definitely to exhaustion, where our systems themselves run on empty, and self-abandonment, where we disconnect from our own needs. And of course, compassion fatigue. Your empathy becomes strained and brittle. And nervous system depletion, where your body carries more than it can metabolize. And the most painful part, it disconnects you from your own humanity. You start believing, I should be able to handle this. I shouldn't need help. I can't let anyone see me struggle. If I break, everything breaks. But none of that is true. And again, a little story about myself. I believed this for a long time until I broke. And that's why this idea of helping the helper is so important for me, and why I do so much around self-care and making sure that you are being true to yourself within this field. Because we often forget ourselves in caring for everybody else. So let's work now on a guided reflection. Where does the myth live within you? Let's take a moment to explore how the myth shows up in your body. So sit comfortably if you not already are. Place a hand on your chest or belly. And just allow your breath to settle. Perhaps allow your exhale to be longer than your inhale. And I'm going to offer now a few gentle prompts. Just notice what rises. Where in my life do I feel pressure to be the strong one? Notice the first imagery or memory that comes up. Is it a family role, a workplace expectation, a relationship dynamic? Again, just notice what rises. Next, what emotions do I hide because I think I shouldn't feel them? Maybe it's anger, fear, sadness, anxiety, simply being overwhelmed. Notice where those emotions live in your body. The third prompt that I have for you is, what part of me believes I am only valuable when I'm holding everything together? Give voice to that part. Let that part speak. It might be your younger self. It might be tired. And next, what would it feel like to not be the strong one for a moment? Perhaps you notice relief coming up, maybe some fear or grief, maybe a sense of freedom. Let yourself imagine what it would be like to not be that strong one. And the last prompt that I have for you, what part of me is tired of being strong? Let that part be seen and let it breathe. Take another breath and let whatever surface be enough. And so these are just a few prompts that you can use to help yourself kind of check in on this myth of the strong helper when you're feeling kind of that overwhelm of being the strong one all the time. You can also add some other mindful pieces in there, like the weight check, where you ask yourself, what weight am I carrying that isn't mine? And notice the answer without judgment. You can also wrap it up with the permission to breathe, where you inhale, I am human, and exhale, I am allowed to feel. You could also add in the shoulder scan, or kind of just do this yourself and notice if your shoulders are lifted, if you're carrying that weight in your shoulder, like so many of us do, and let them drop. This alone can dismantle 10% of the myth. I don't have to carry this. You can even do some of these mindful add-ons that I just mentioned by themselves, if you just have a few seconds in your day to check in with yourself. As we move forward, it's important for us to also recognize that strength is not what you think it is. The myth says strength is never breaking, but breaking is how humans release pressure. The myth also says that strength is never needing, but needing is how we connect as human beings. It says that we're never faltering, but faltering sometimes and failing is how we learn. It says that never feeling too much, but feeling deeply is how we show our empathy, how we empathize with others. Real strength, sustainable strength looks different. Real strength is knowing your limits and reminding yourself often that limits are wisdom, not weakness. Real strength is asking for help, right? This is what we would teach our clients. That support is a sign of self-trust. Real strength is also knowing that we have to rest, especially before we collapse. Rest is prevention, not indulgence. Strength is also knowing that when we feel our emotions, that's an important thing. We can feel them without drowning in them, because emotional presence is resilience. Real strength is also setting boundaries. So knowing our limits was one, setting those boundaries is another, because boundaries protect your humanity. Strength is also telling the truth about your capacity. Another boundary. Honesty is strength. Real strength is letting yourself be human, because your humanity is your greatest resource. Strength is not the absence of vulnerability. Strength is the ability to stay connected to yourself through vulnerability. Before we end today, I'd like to offer you one more practice focusing around letting yourself be human and to truly soften the myth's grip. So if they are not already, place your feet on the floor and allow your shoulders to drop, even if that means that you have to physically kind of roll them back down your back and allowing them to hang a little looser. Bring them down from your ears. Say to yourself, I am allowed to be human. I am allowed to have limits. I am allowed to need support. I don't have to be the strong one all the time. Let your breath deepen. Let your body soften. And let the truth land. And now let's give you some additional mindful examples that you can use again if you just have a short period of time to still combat that myth. And that's the embracing practice, noticing where your body is bracing, your jaw, your shoulders, your belly, and release that area by 5%. Just 5%, that's enough. The human hand practice, where you place your hand on your heart and repeat the mantra to yourself, I am a human being, not a machine. And feel the warmth of your own palm against your chest. And the last example that I'll give you today is let someone hold something. Practice imagining handing one small piece of your emotional load to someone you trust. Just one piece. And notice how your body responds when you do this. When you stop performing strength, something beautiful happens. Your nervous system relaxes. Your body stops living in that performance mode. Your relationships deepen. People connect with your authenticity, not your armor. Your boundaries strengthen. You stop overgiving. Your authenticity returns. You feel like yourself again. Your empathy becomes sustainable. You can continue to care without collapsing. Your work as a helper becomes more grounded. You show up from your center, not your performance. Your body stops bracing. Your muscles stop carrying that emotional weight. Your heart becomes available again. Softness returns. Presence returns. You return. You don't lose strength. You gain yourself. Thank you for being here again today. As you move back into your day, remember, you don't have to be the strong one to be the good one. You don't have to be unshakable to be effective. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. Your humanity is not a flaw. It is your foundation. You are allowed to soften. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be held. And as always, you are not alone. I'll see you in the next episode.